Hello and welcome to the Warrior Arts Renaissance Show, where you give us hard questions and we give you solid answers. I'm your host, Dr. Philip Payne. This week, we're going to be answering some questions that were sent in by listeners. First one has to do with the legitimacy. Basically, is the question: what is the legitimacy of home study courses? Now, this has been a topic of some debate for a number of years in the martial arts communities, especially in some of the circles that I have associated in, have some of the groups that I belong to, and it seems like everywhere you turn, you have somebody with a different answer. I think a lot of that has to do with what their personal experiences with it has been, their level of experience with it, and whether or not those experiences were good or bad. For instance, I have a kung fu instructor I train under, Shashi Ray, that you all know if you've listened to past episodes. He's been a somewhat frequent uh, co-host or interviewee on different topics. Um, I think he would like to see everything he does put on video for future generations to be able to learn it. Um, Shashi James Dean out in California. Phenomenal martial artist. Nothing bad to say about his skills, but he absolutely refuses to put out training videos because he feels like well, I don't want to put words in his mouth. My understanding of his reasoning is that he feels that it would almost cheapen his art, so that people could just go back and they could get lazy and not practice for years or what have you, and then go back and look at the video. I'm kind of in between. I think it's a valuable thing. I produce home study courses, probably more than almost any martial arts instructor I know. Uh, some pretty in-depth training, in my opinion, and I don't have a problem with my students learning from it. I don't have a problem with them using it as an archive for in case something happens to me, I pass away or what have you, or they're far from me or what have you, and they need an opportunity to glean new knowledge or to refresh on old knowledge. I don't have a problem with that. But I've seen some home study courses that weren't uh, weren't worth the money that the certificates they got at the end of it were the students got at the end of it were printed on. That used to be a really big thing. I remember back in the 90s, there was a thing you could write to this guy, I think he was in Chicago, and he was a Kenpo expert, supposedly. And he would promote you way up into the high dollar ranks if you just watched his video and told him to do so. That's back when it was still VHS cassette tapes. Um, that's a fraud. Okay, I mean, there was no testing involved. I thought I would learn some techniques and then go to Chicago. I think it was Chicago, maybe St. Louis, um, wherever he was. I thought I'd go there and demonstrate my techniques, or I could very easily film myself doing the techniques and send them back to him. No, no. If I got it in the mail, the certificate came with it. Um, simple. I, uh, I couldn't help but see fraud in that. And I'm not saying the guy's techniques were from what I saw in the first video, which is the only one I acquired because I didn't see it as legitimate. The techniques seemed legitimate, but I got that yellow belt rank or whatever it was um, just by paying my money. And he had this argument when I called him up and asked him what he was doing. He had a very thought out argument as to why he thought this was legitimate. And it had to do with his police training or what have you. And I don't know. It's been too many years, 20 some years. Um, but I didn't see it as legitimate, and so I didn't continue with it. I've seen people um, pay huge amounts of money into distance training and get nothing out of it. I've seen people pay next to nothing for distance training, and it was some of the best training they ever got, or that was available. You know, Jim Korn, who I talked about quite a bit on here, and Mark Klein, Grandmasters Korn and Klein, each have distance training programs. Okay, I can't knock that because they are superior martial artists and superior instructors. But nothing that I've ever learned watching one of their videos came close to learning what I learned from them in person. And so, I guess you can almost say that for me, the jury's still kind of out on that. I do think we'll see more and more of it, especially with this COVID and the way things are changing in the world. Because I think more and more people are going to look into distance training options, and there's going to be more of a market for those of us who do the distance training options or provide them um, to get into that. But I just I think you got to be careful, okay? And I think the answer to whether or not they're legitimate really depends on what you're using. So that kind of leads into the next question. The next question was asked was book learning. Is it legitimate? They kind of it's just an older form of distance learning, and it was interesting to me is the number of people who say they would never ever take part in a video training program, and yet they buy books by the hundreds. It seems like um, on martial arts, and they see that as different. And to me, there's not a whole lot of difference other than with a video. You get to actually see the person in motion and actually see what they're doing, and you can rewind it, so to speak, or back it up. We're in digital age now. You can back it up. You can play it again. You can play it in slow motion. Um, Whereas in a book, you got words and pictures. Now, I've been studying martial arts from books for and magazines and what have you far longer than from video, and nobody ever questioned that. But the first time I ever told any of my friends, "Oh, I've invested in some video training material," I got laughed at. Martial arts that way. I had an old karate instructor of mine. I told him that I had purchased another master's video just of him doing all the kata in the system, and he laughed. And he said, "You can't live. Let's." I think the way you worded it was him robbing the kata of its spirit. Well, I wasn't just going to learn the forms from watching the video. I was going to learn the general movements of the form from the video, and then get with that master and have him tweak everything and hone it and make it better. But I got a lot of negative review off of that. And my question is why? Because the same master has a book in which he goes step by step in pictures and written description of the same kata, and using that, okay. So yeah, I think you can definitely learn from books. I mean, people have been writing down the quote unquote secrets of the martial arts for thousands of years, and people have been learning from it for thousands of years. Some of the techniques that we do on the higher levels were handed down in secret and transmitted almost in a code, and it had to be written, and it had to be deciphered, and that's only in certain systems that's true. But I'm working on a system now. Trying to, it's a very old system that's pretty much been lost to the ages. But there is written material on it, and we're trying to breathe some life back into it. Not that we'll ever be able to bring it back as a whole because we don't have a master of it to teach it to us, but we have pieces of it, and we can put back together what we do have, figure out how it worked together and what's missing. We couldn't do that if the masters thousands of years ago had not written down the secrets of what they did. So all of that has to do with is it legitimate or is it fraud? I guess the next question I want to go into that I think kind of ties into that. I don't do this on purpose. I don't sit down and say, "Oh, I've got 500 questions," because I don't. I'll sit down and I'll look at like, questions this week, and three of them fit together into a topic. And this week, we've got this thing about fraud. And the guy asks about what he calls BS martial arts, fraud, and chi. I just want to say this: chi is not, BS. It's not fraud. Uh, Using chi in the martial arts is not fraud. The way it is taught as quote unquote um, chi fighting is, in my opinion, fraud. I've yet to meet someone who can actually knock me out at full speed um, using just his energy. Now, I do know people who can do some fascinating things with internal energy projection. Um, I'd love to get one of them on here or several of them on here at some point and talk about that. I use chi all the time, but I use it for healing purposes. Um, Most of you who've listened for any length of time to the podcast know that I'm pretty deep into the natural healing, holistic study of the combative sciences. Um, I use it in Reiki. I use it in Ling Chi. I do Tai Chi for my own health and teach it to others. And I do believe that with the right training, and I'm talking thousands of hours of training to get it truly right, you can do it in a heartbeat when your life's depending on it, and make your technique, enhance it with energy projection from your mind in a strike or a grapple or what have you. I do believe in it. I believe that I've developed a really um, satisfactory to me enhancement of my technique over the years by doing that. On the other hand, I'm not going to stand 5 feet from you and try to knock you out without touching you because I think that is BS. I'm not saying there aren't people who can manipulate things. Um, that's a whole other topic and discussion. But to be able to do it at full speed on a second's notice, I've yet to meet somebody who can show me that they can do it. It's we that would be several episodes in length to talk about the difference there. Is chi fraud? No. Is chi at a distance for fighting fraud? Yes. In my opinion, it is. Is it? Do we manipulate energy pulses in the body when we strike nerve centers with the right intent and shut them down? Yes, we do. If you're trained properly, you can and know that. Last question I'm going to go to today has to do with abusive teachers. What do you do about abusive teachers? And my thing on this is very simply, I'm really careful to. I'm really careful about it when somebody says, "Oh, I went to such and such teacher and they were abusive," um, because different martial arts, different combative science traditions have different approaches. I've done things with my students that were done to me and with me by my teachers who you did these things to me and with me to help me become a better fighter, better at defending myself, my family, my loved ones. And I cherish those lessons and I pass them on to my students. And there are schools around here where I'm sure there are instructors who tell their students, don't go over there and study with Dr. Payne because Dr. Payne is abusive. Um, on the other hand, I have students who have visited some of those schools and come back and said that they learned nothing practical. I think a lot of it has to do with what you want. Okay, if you want sport karate and you want to win trophies and what have you, there are schools for that. There's nothing wrong with that so long as it's what you're looking for. If you want to learn hardcore street self defense, if you want to learn tactical techniques that will get you out of a life and death situation in a heartbeat, That takes some pretty grueling physical training sometimes. Um, I don't trust a guy who's never been punched in the nose to take a punch in the nose in a fight. Okay, my Ishinru teacher popped me in the nose when I was really young and knocked me down, and tears in my eyes. I was probably about 10 years old. People say, "Well, that was cruel. He was abusive." No, he taught me how to take a punch. Okay, and to this day, I can take a punch to the face and keep on fighting. A lot of people in these more contemporary systems can't do that anymore. Um, so I'm just throwing that out there. What is an abusive? If you feel the instructor is abusive, then my answer to you is what to do with him is or her is to go somewhere else. Whether it's you think they're verbally abusive, whether you think they're mentally abusive, you got also got to understand a lot of these old systems are really military arts. Okay, and you gotta ask yourself, are they being any harder on me than say someone that is on a new recruit going through basic training or boot camp, or they get talked down to, and um, get their spirit broken so that it can then be built up stronger. And a lot of these teachers who are from the old school systems still do that. Not all, okay. There are some old school Do systems, and there are some old school Jitsu systems, and we've talked about that in our earlier podcast, the difference there. But I'm like as I said before, I'm very wary of saying, okay, this is how we define abuse by an instructor. If they're not breaking bones, maybe even if they are, okay. I train stick on body with my students when they get higher levels of kali. That's what was done with me. Okay, my teacher, I started out, I had to learn all the techniques empty hand, and then I had to do them empty hand, and he had a stick and I had none. And when I got good enough at that, then I had a stick and he had two. Okay, and I got the tar beat out of me. But there are very few people that I've come across who do kali who can best me because I learned it the old way. Um, Now, some people are, I don't want that. I don't want that. Well, then don't train in those schools. Okay. And maybe the question to ask when you approach an instructor is, like, well, how do you train? Is it this intense or is it that intense? What's the situation? And if it sounds like it's something you don't want to do, then just don't do it. Okay. And instructors should be honest about it to what extent they can be, because you got to understand on higher levels, sometimes we make a promise, basically take an oath and say we will only give this to people of certain skill levels, certain knowledge levels, and of certain types of character. And if you're walking off the street, I don't know if you meet those requirements. I can tell you what training's like for the first year or so, but after that, you got to actually get there before you find out. So that's my answer on that. That's all the time we have for this week. See you back here next week, and we'll take